On May 23, 2019, a 27-year-old climber from India stood near the summit ridge of Mount Everest. She had trained for 2 years, paid $45,000 to a commercial expedition company, and traveled halfway around the world to stand on the highest point on Earth. Within 4 hours, she was dead. Not killed by an avalanche, not taken by a sudden storm, but simply absorbed into a traffic jam at 28,000 feet. So chaotic and so prolonged that even now, 6 years later, no one can agree on exactly where she stopped moving. Anjali Kulkarni's body remains on the mountain. Like more than 200 others before her, she will stay there indefinitely, because Mount Everest does not give back what it takes. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a Thursday. Every year, between 600 and 900 climbers attempt to summit Mount Everest. Most return with photos and the ability to describe a view that less than 0.0001% of human beings have ever seen. But hidden within those expedition numbers is a darker reality the commercial guiding industry doesn't advertise. Since the first confirmed summit in 1953, more than 340 people have died on the mountain. That's roughly 1 death for every 20 successful summits. The bodies that remain on Everest, frozen at various altitudes, are not gathered to be brought home. Most are left in place because the cost of retrieval, financial, logistical, and human, exceeds what any government or family is willing to pay, and the numbers are accelerating. Mount Everest kills more climbers in a single bad season than many entire mountain ranges kill in a decade. Yet somehow, it maintains its reputation as a bucket list achievement, a goal accessible to anyone with sufficient money, basic fitness, and the discipline to follow a guide up a fixed rope. This perception isn't just wrong, it's deadly. Mount Everest is a 29,032-foot pyramid of rock and ice straddling the border between Nepal and Tibet. Its summit penetrates the lower edge of the jet stream. It generates its own weather. It contains a zone of altitude so hostile that the human body begins to die the moment it enters and continues dying for as long as it stays. It hides crevasses beneath snow bridges that have already collapsed under thousands of previous boot prints. It bakes climbers in ultraviolet radiation strong enough to cause blindness in hours. It freezes exposed flesh in minutes. It harbors avalanche paths that have killed more Sherpas than tourists. And it sells itself to the world as a guided experience, complete with Wi-Fi at base camp, gourmet meals, and oxygen delivered by porter to staging points along the route. The illusion of safety begins the moment a climber arrives in Kathmandu. Permit offices that issue summit passes for cash. Expedition companies advertising guaranteed summits. Equipment rental shops with rows of identical down suits. Briefing rooms with PowerPoint presentations about acclimatization schedules. The infrastructure suggests civilization, control, professional management. Everest has been packaged as a commercial expedition product so successfully that thousands of people forget they're contracting to enter an environment that will actively try to kill them every second they remain inside it. The mountain doesn't care about your contract. The first thing that strikes most climbers is the line. The famous photograph from May 22, 2019, showing hundreds of climbers stacked along the Hillary Step Bridge in single file, captured something the climbing industry had been trying to ignore for 2 decades. Everest is no longer a mountaineering challenge in the traditional sense. It is a queue with a 30% mortality risk if you're caught in it during the wrong weather window. The scale of this queue creates the first deadly illusion. From base camp at 17,600 feet, the mountain looks manageable. The route up the Khumbu icefall has been engineered by Sherpa teams who install ladders across crevasses and fix ropes through the most dangerous sections. The camps above appear as orderly clusters on the mountainside. The photographs from previous expeditions show smiling clients holding flags at the summit. In reality, the climb is a journey into an environment so hostile that mountaineering doctors describe the human body above 26,000 feet as actively decomposing. Cells die. Muscle tissue breaks down faster than it can be rebuilt. Brain function deteriorates. The body cannibalizes itself for energy because it cannot absorb enough oxygen to sustain normal metabolism. The longer a climber stays above this threshold, the more permanent the damage becomes. This zone has a name. Climbers call it the death zone. It begins at 26,247 feet. Mount Everest's summit sits nearly 3,000 feet above the upper limit of where human beings can survive for extended periods. No climber has ever spent a full week above this altitude and lived to describe it. Most who attempt the summit spend less than 24 hours in the zone, and even that brief exposure produces measurable, sometimes permanent, physiological damage. The second illusion is accessibility. Mount Everest's commercial guiding industry has spent 3 decades convincing the public that the mountain can be climbed by clients with minimal technical experience. Companies advertise summit success rates of 70% or higher. They emphasize the fixed ropes, the established camps, the Sherpa support, the supplemental oxygen. They show videos of clients celebrating at the top. They do not, in their marketing materials, dwell on the fact that the success rate is calculated only among clients who choose to make a summit attempt, a self-selected group that excludes everyone who turned back at lower altitudes due to illness, injury, or fear. The actual rate of clients who complete a full Everest expedition successfully and without serious medical consequence is significantly lower than what the brochures suggest. The infrastructure of the mountain creates a false sense of competence. Climbers who could not lead a moderate alpine route in their home country find themselves clipped to a fixed line above 27,000 feet, mechanically advancing one boot at a time, surrounded by other clients doing the same. They are not climbing in the traditional sense. They are being conveyed up a mountain by a system of ropes, ladders, oxygen tanks, and Sherpas who do the actual work of navigation, route finding, and emergency response. When the system fails, when the rope breaks, when the oxygen runs out, when the weather changes, when the Sherpa cannot reach them, the client is left in an environment they have no skills to survive. The third illusion is timing. The Everest climbing season is narrow. Most expeditions target a window of approximately 2 weeks in May, between the retreat of winter storms and the arrival of the monsoon. This window has in recent years become a bottleneck. 300 to 400 climbers may attempt the summit during the same brief stretch of acceptable weather. The result is overcrowding at altitudes where overcrowding kills. A climber stuck in line at 28,000 feet for 2 hours consumes oxygen they cannot replace. Their body temperature drops, their extremities freeze, their judgment deteriorates. By the time they reach the summit, they have already exceeded their physiological budget for the day. The descent, the part of the climb where the majority of Everest deaths occur, becomes a desperate race against the depletion of resources their body can no longer regenerate. The mountain's altitude compounds these challenges. At sea level, the atmosphere contains roughly 21% oxygen at full pressure. At the summit of Everest, the pressure is so reduced that each breath delivers less than 1/3 of the oxygen content available at the base of the mountain. The human body has not evolved to function at this altitude. Even with supplemental oxygen, climbers operate at the equivalent of approximately 26,000 feet of altitude. Without supplemental oxygen, the summit is at the absolute physiological limit of human survival, and only a small number of elite climbers have ever reached it without bottled gas. But oxygen is only one variable. The death zone is also a zone of extreme cold. Temperatures on the summit ridge regularly fall below -30 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill values that can exceed -80. Exposed skin freezes in seconds. Fingers and toes inside modern climbing boots and gloves can still develop frostbite severe enough to require amputation. The mountain has produced an entire generation of high-altitude climbers missing fingers, toes, and parts of their faces. These are the survivors. On May 10, 1996, 8 climbers died on Mount Everest in a single 36-hour period during what came to be known as the disaster documented in John Krakauer's Into Thin Air. The deaths occurred when a sudden storm trapped multiple commercial expeditions high on the mountain. Among the dead were 2 of the most experienced guides working on Everest at the time. They had summited multiple times. They had trained for exactly these conditions. They died alongside their clients, in some cases attempting to save them, in some cases simply unable to descend through wind and snow that had transformed the route into something unrecognizable. The 1996 disaster was not the worst death toll in Everest history. That distinction belongs to April 18, 2014, when an avalanche in the Khumbu icefall killed 16 Sherpas in a single morning. They were carrying loads to higher camps in support of commercial expeditions. They were not climbing for personal achievement. They were working. The avalanche released a section of hanging glacier that had been visible to every climber on the route for years. Mountaineers had identified it as a hazard. No one had figured out how to avoid it, because the icefall has no alternative passage. The following year, on April 25, 2015, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake centered in Nepal triggered an avalanche that swept through Everest Base Camp itself. 22 people died in what had been considered the safest place on the mountain. The deaths included climbers, guides, doctors, and support staff who had never set foot above the icefall. Base camp, which most clients view as a comfortable staging area with kitchen tents and communications equipment, had been wiped through by a wall of ice and snow moving at over 200 miles per hour. Heat is not the killer on Everest the way it is in the Grand Canyon. The killer on Everest is the opposite: the absence of warmth, the absence of oxygen, the absence of any conditions that allow the human body to maintain itself. Cold operates through mechanisms most clients don't fully understand until they're inside them. The body responds to cold by restricting blood flow to extremities. Fingers and toes lose circulation first. The body prioritizes the core. The brain receives reduced oxygen and reduced blood flow simultaneously. Decision-making collapses. Climbers who would never make obvious errors at sea level begin doing inexplicable things. Sitting down to rest in places where sitting means freezing to death, removing gloves to adjust equipment, unclipping from fixed ropes for reasons they cannot later remember. Hypothermia at extreme altitude is not the slow, recoverable hypothermia of temperate environments. It is a cascade that, once triggered above 26,000 feet, almost always ends in death. The climber's body cannot generate enough metabolic heat to overcome the cold. Without immediate evacuation to lower altitudes, evacuations that are nearly impossible to execute from the summit ridge, the victim's core temperature falls until cardiac function fails. But cold doesn't kill the fastest. The fastest killer on Everest is high-altitude pulmonary edema, called HAPE, and its neurological cousin, high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE. Both conditions result from the body's failure to function at extreme altitude. In HAPE, fluid accumulates in the lungs, drowning the climber from the inside while they continue to breathe air. In HACE, the brain swells inside the skull, producing confusion, loss of coordination, hallucinations, and eventually unconsciousness and death. Both conditions can develop rapidly. Both can kill within hours. The only effective treatment is immediate descent to lower altitudes. On Everest, immediate descent is rarely possible. On May 15, 2006, a British climber named David Sharp sat down inside a rock alcove near 27,900 feet on the mountain's northeast ridge. He was alive when he stopped moving. He was alive when approximately 40 other climbers passed him on their way to the summit that morning. He was alive when most of those climbers passed him again on their way back down. By the time anyone attempted to help him, he was unable to be moved, and the conditions at that altitude made any rescue attempt suicidal. He died alone in view of dozens of people on what is now one of the most photographed sections of the mountain. The Sharp case ignited a debate within the climbing community about ethics on Everest. Climbers who passed him later said they had assumed he was a corpse, one of the many bodies that line the route and serve as informal landmarks. Others said they had recognized he was alive, but concluded that rescue was impossible. Still others said the commercial guiding system had created conditions in which clients could not be expected to abandon their own summit attempts to help strangers. The mountain provided no clear answer. It simply added Sharp's body to the count. The bodies on Everest are not a metaphor. They are physical features of the route. Climbers refer to them by location and informal nickname. Green Boots was the body of an Indian climber, Tsewang Paljor, who died in 1996 and whose distinctive green boots were visible to every northeast ridge climber for nearly 2 decades. He was eventually moved out of immediate sight, though his remains are still on the mountain. Other bodies serve as waypoints. Climbers know they are close to the summit when they pass certain corpses. They know they have descended below the Hillary step when they reach others. These bodies remain because retrieval is essentially impossible. A human body at 28,000 feet weighs the same as it does at sea level, but moving it requires climbers who are themselves operating at the edge of survival. Helicopter rescue is not possible above approximately 24,000 feet, due to the thinness of the air. Sherpa teams have, in a few rare cases, brought bodies down for families willing to pay extraordinary sums and accept the risk to additional lives. Most families do not. Most bodies stay. This permanence creates a unique psychological environment on the mountain. Climbers ascend a route lined with the frozen remains of previous attempts. They use these remains as navigation aids. They photograph them, or are warned not to photograph them. They step over them. They climb past sitting figures whose posture suggests rest rather than death, until they look at the face and understand. The mountain does not hide its death toll. It displays it openly, and the displays are routinely ignored. But weather and altitude are predictable compared to human behavior on Everest. The mountain's most dangerous element isn't environmental, it's psychological. Every year, intelligent, accomplished people make decisions on Everest that they would never make in any other context. They continue climbing when their oxygen is depleted. They ignore turnaround times set by their own guides. They refuse to descend when they show clear symptoms of altitude sickness. They push through to the summit knowing that the descent will be more dangerous than the ascent because they have already invested too much, financially, emotionally, physically, to accept failure. This phenomenon is summit fever in its most extreme form. The investment in an Everest expedition is enormous. Clients pay between $45,000 and $200,000 for guided attempts. They spend months in physical preparation. They take time off from careers, away from families, away from any aspect of their normal lives. By the time they reach the upper camps, the psychological pressure to summit has become overwhelming. Turning back feels like the destruction of years of effort. Continuing forward feels like the only acceptable outcome. This trap is reinforced by the structure of commercial expeditions. Clients climb in groups, on schedules dictated by weather windows and rope-fixing crews. When the group decides to attempt the summit, individual hesitation becomes social cost. A client who turns back while their teammates continue must descend alone, with reduced support, accepting that their expedition has ended in failure while others succeed. Few people, having spent six figures and months of effort, choose this option. The result is a steady flow of climbers who push beyond their physiological capacity because the social and financial costs of turning back exceed in their immediate calculation the risk of continuing. The mathematics is wrong. The risk of continuing when continuing means entering the death zone with insufficient reserves is death. Cost of turning back is only money and ego, but at 27,000 feet, with the summit visible above and a successful summit photograph imagined for years, the calculation feels different than it does at sea level. This is when people begin to disappear. Mount Everest's missing climbers represent a small but significant subset of total fatalities. Some bodies are recovered or located after death. Others vanish entirely. Falls into crevasses can carry climbers hundreds of feet into the glacier, where the ice closes over them and seals them inside the mountain. Some of these bodies emerge decades later at the foot of the glacier, having been carried down by the slow movement of the ice. George Mallory, who disappeared near the summit in 1924, was not found until 1999. Andrew Irvine, his climbing partner, has never been found at all, though searches continue. The question of whether Mallory and Irvine reached the summit before they died, a question that would, if answered, rewrite mountaineering history, remains unanswered because Irvine's camera, which he carried during the attempt, has never been located. More recently, climbers have disappeared from established routes during clear weather with full Sherpa support in front of dozens of witnesses. They step off the ridge in moments of confusion. They wander into the wrong section of the mountain in the dark. They sit down to rest in conditions where sitting down is fatal. The mountain absorbs them with the same indifference it has shown for a century. Mount Everest search and rescue operations exist, but they operate under constraints that have no parallel in lower altitude environments. Helicopter rescue above 20,000 feet requires specialized pilots, equipment, and conditions that align infrequently. Ground rescue from the upper mountain requires Sherpas and guides who are themselves operating at the edge of survival. The same environmental factors that endanger climbers, extreme cold, low oxygen, unpredictable weather, also limit rescue effectiveness. In May 2017, a Sherpa team attempted to recover a Slovak climber who had become incapacitated near 28,000 feet on the southeast ridge. The rescue team reached him alive. They were unable to move him. He died during the attempt, and one of the rescuers nearly died with him. The team retreated. The climber's body remains on the mountain. These operations come at enormous human cost. The Sherpas who work on Everest accept risks that have no equivalent in any other profession. Their death rate per expedition exceeds that of military combat units. They climb the same dangerous sections multiple times per season, carrying loads, fixing ropes, supporting clients. They are paid wages that, while substantial by Nepali standards, are negligible compared to what their clients pay for guiding services. The 2014 icefall avalanche killed 16 Sherpas in one morning. Their families received compensation that, in some cases, did not exceed $400. The commercial expedition industry continues largely unchanged. These deaths reveal patterns in how the mountain claims victims. Most fatalities occur on descent, not ascent. Most occur within the death zone, between 26,000 feet and the summit. Most involve some combination of exhaustion, altitude sickness, weather, and overcrowding. Most victims had access to safety information and had received explicit warnings from their guides, but chose to continue past turnaround times. Most were aware of recent deaths on the same route in previous seasons. The psychology behind these patterns is consistent across decades. Everest attracts a self-selecting population of high achievers, executives, doctors, lawyers, athletes, who have built their lives on the principle that determination and resources can overcome obstacles. The mountain rewards this mindset to a point and then punishes it absolutely. The qualities that make a person successful in business or professional life do not translate to high-altitude survival. The mountain does not respond to negotiation, persistence, or willingness to pay. It responds only to physiology, weather, and the climber's ability to descend on their own power before their reserves are exhausted. Risk perception research applies poorly to Everest because the environment exceeds the range of conditions human beings can intuitively assess. Most people have no experience that prepares them for an altitude where their own brain begins to malfunction within hours. They cannot calibrate the danger because they have no reference point. They rely on their guides, on their preparation, on their fitness, on their equipment. These are all useful, but none of them are sufficient. The mountain has killed elite climbers in peak condition with the best equipment available. It has killed guides who knew the route better than anyone alive. It will continue to kill anyone whose physiology fails at the wrong moment. The fatal sequence on Everest typically begins with a delay, a summit attempt scheduled to reach the top by 11 Oz AM. The standard turnaround time for safe descent runs long due to overcrowding, equipment problems, or weather. The climber reaches the summit at 1 p.m. or later. The descent begins with depleted oxygen and depleted physical reserves. Daylight begins to fade. Temperatures drop. The climber's pace slows. They reach the Hillary step in conditions for which they have no margin. They make an error, or they simply run out of the resources they need to keep moving. They sit down. They do not stand up again. This sequence has repeated, with variations, hundreds of times. It will continue to repeat as long as commercial expeditions continue to operate on the mountain. The structural pressures that produce these deaths, financial investment, social commitment, narrow weather windows, overcrowding, depleted oxygen at altitude, do not have technological solutions. They are inherent to the project of bringing inexperienced climbers to the highest point on Earth. This process can unfold over hours, or in some cases, minutes. The transition from tired but functional to incapacitated and dying can occur within a single 30-minute period at extreme altitude. Climbers who appear to be moving normally have collapsed dead within sight of teammates who were preparing to wait for them at the next rope station. The mountain is indifferent to the suffering it produces. It operates according to atmospheric and physiological principles that have not changed since human beings first reached its slopes a century ago. Yet expeditions continue, and the client base grows, because Everest's danger is invisible until it is absolute. From base camp, the mountain looks like a climb. From Camp 4, it still looks like a climb. From the summit ridge, with oxygen flowing and a guide leading the way, it still looks like a climb. The danger is hidden inside the physiology of the climber, inside the weather that has not yet arrived, inside the rope that has not yet failed, inside the decisions that have not yet been required. By the time the danger becomes visible, the climber is already inside it, and the options for survival have narrowed to a single path: down, fast, without rest. This invisibility isn't deliberate deception by the commercial guiding industry, but it has the same effect. Expedition companies have economic incentives to maintain success rates that attract paying clients. They emphasize their safety records, their experienced guides, their Sherpa support, their oxygen logistics. They are not lying. The mountain has been climbed thousands of times. Most clients survive, but the cumulative reality of Everest, the bodies on the route, the seasons with multiple deaths, the structural overcrowding, the increasing average age and decreasing average experience of clients produces a different story than any individual expedition brochure tells. Mount Everest's lethality extends beyond individual tragedy to questions about humanity's relationship with extreme environments. Modern technology has not made the mountain safer in any fundamental sense. Better oxygen systems, better clothing, better weather forecasting, fixed ropes through the most dangerous sections. All of these have made Everest more accessible without making it less deadly. The mountain has simply produced more climbers to kill. The death rate per expedition has remained relatively stable across decades, even as the absolute number of attempts has multiplied. Standing at Everest Base Camp, a climber is looking at the upper edge of the troposphere. The summit penetrates altitudes where commercial aircraft cruise. The peak experiences atmospheric conditions that have more in common with stratospheric flight than with any environment human beings have evolved to occupy. The forces that have killed climbers on Everest for a century are not adaptable. They are physical. The mountain will continue to operate according to the same atmospheric and physiological laws long after the commercial guiding industry has ceased to exist. This perspective is both humbling and terrifying. Everest reminds us that no amount of preparation, equipment, or money can overcome the basic fact that human beings cannot survive indefinitely at the altitudes the mountain requires us to enter. We are sea-level creatures attempting to function in an environment that lies above the limit of our species' adaptive range. The mountain does not bend to accommodate our presence. We either descend before our reserves are exhausted, or we don't. The tragedy of Everest deaths is not the danger of the mountain itself, but the preventable nature of the deaths it produces. The vast majority of Everest fatalities result from decisions that climbers, guides, and expedition leaders had the information to avoid. Turnaround times exist because they work. Weather forecasts exist because they are accurate. Acclimatization schedules exist because they prevent altitude illness. The information is available before every expedition. The decisions that produce deaths are made by people who knew the rules and chose to break them, or by people who had been promised by their guides that the rules could be bent, or by people who were trapped in conditions that no decision could resolve. Each death on Everest represents a small tragedy of human nature, magnified by the unique pressures of a mountain that does not forgive errors. Each climber who dies above 26,000 feet had a turnaround time, each had warnings, each had teammates who could have stopped them. The system that produces Everest deaths is not a single failure point, but a cascade of small, accumulated decisions that combine into catastrophe. Mount Everest does not hide its dangers. The death statistics are published. The bodies on the route are visible. The history of disasters is documented in books that nearly every climber has read before they arrive at base camp. Films have been made about the mountain's worst seasons. Memoirs by survivors describe in detail what goes wrong and why. The information is comprehensive. The warnings are clear. The choice to attempt the mountain remains with each individual climber. But choice implies understanding. And understanding requires accepting uncomfortable truths about the physical limits of the human body and the psychological vulnerabilities of high-stakes goal pursuit. It means acknowledging that the same mountain that has produced legendary summit photographs has produced an equal number of deaths that no photograph captures. It means recognizing that the qualities that brought a climber to Everest, determination, financial success, physical fitness, the ability to push through discomfort, are precisely the qualities that get climbers killed when the mountain demands surrender rather than persistence. Most importantly, it means accepting that Mount Everest does not care about your training, your equipment, your guide's experience, your oxygen supply, or your confidence in your own preparation. It operates according to atmospheric principles that were established long before mountaineering existed and will continue long after it has ended. The summit is not a destination the mountain agrees to share. It is a point in the sky that human beings can reach only by entering an environment that begins killing them on arrival, and they reach it only if they can leave before the killing is complete. Mount Everest is not trying to kill you. It is simply being itself. A geological feature of such extreme altitude that its summit penetrates the limits of human survival as a natural consequence of its height. The danger emerges from the intersection of this environment with human psychology and physiology that evolved at sea level. We are organisms designed for atmospheres twice as dense as the one at the summit. We carry oxygen in tanks because we cannot store it in our bodies. We carry warmth in synthetic insulation because we cannot generate enough of our own. We make decisions in the death zone with brains that are no longer functioning at full capacity, and we trust those decisions because we have no other source of judgment available. Mount Everest reveals these mismatches with brutal clarity. It is a place where the normal human experience of effort and reward breaks down, where willpower is not enough, where preparation is not enough, where money and guides and equipment are not enough. It is beautiful precisely because it lies beyond what humans were built to reach. It is dangerous precisely because reaching it requires entering conditions that operate according to principles that do not accommodate human survival. Standing on the summit of Mount Everest, on the rare occasions when standing is possible, a climber is briefly higher than every other point on the planet's surface. They are also closer to death than they have ever been, or are likely to be again. The same atmosphere that allows them to see the curvature of the Earth is the atmosphere that will kill them if they stay too long. The same view that justifies the climb is the view from a place the human body cannot occupy without consequence. Mount Everest does not pretend to be safe. The mountain provides its own warnings. The bodies on the route are warnings. The annual death tolls are warnings. The presence of guides whose own teammates have died on the same slopes is a warning. The Sherpas who refuse to climb past the section where their colleagues died in 2014 are warnings. The fact that some of the most experienced climbers in the world have died on the mountain alongside their inexperienced clients is the loudest warning of all. The warnings are not subtle. The information is not hidden. The mountain has been documenting its lethality for a century, and the documentation is freely available to anyone willing to read it. What is missing is not information. What is missing is the willingness of climbers to take that information personally, to accept that the people who died on Everest were not careless, not weak, not unprepared. They were people who believed, as every Everest climber believes, that their preparation, their fitness, their guide, their equipment, and their personal capacity would carry them through. For some, it does. For roughly 1 in 20, it does not. And the mountain, indifferent to the calculation, keeps adding to its count. Every year, on average, between 5 and 15 climbers do not come home. Most of them remain on the mountain, frozen at altitudes from which retrieval is impossible. They will stay there until the glacier moves them, until the wind exposes them, until the slow geology of the Himalaya finally releases what it took. Mount Everest does not give back what it takes. It never has.